When my daughter-in-law told us to go downstairs, I smiled instead of crying. I still remember that moment clearly. She did not shout, she did not raise her voice. She simply stood near the stairs and pointed down, as if showing us where the trash belonged. "Just for now," she said softly, "it will be easier for everyone." I nodded. I held my husband's hand, and we walked down those basement steps like guests who had stayed too long. The door closed behind us with a quiet sound, not a slam, just a soft click. That sound stayed with me. I stood there in the dim light, surrounded by boxes that were not ours, smelling damp air and old paint. My heart felt heavy, but I did not speak. I did not want my husband to see my tears. We had raised. A single choice can change your life forever. Today, I'm sharing how betrayal forced me to choose myself when no one else would. Before the first chapter unfolds, please subscribe and hit like to help us reach others who might need to hear this. I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Leave your city name in the comments so I can welcome you personally. And now, the story begins. Raised our son with love, with patience, with sacrifice, and now we were standing in his basement, unsure if we were welcome in his life anymore. I wanted to ask many questions. I wanted to say many things, but instead I stayed quiet. Then my husband leaned closer to me and whispered something I was never supposed to hear. A truth he had carried for years, a truth that explained everything. That whisper changed the way I saw my marriage, my son, and myself. And it began on the day our son shut the basement door on us. My name is Mary. I am not a strong woman in the loud way. I have never argued well. I have never demanded much. I learned early in life that peace often comes from silence. My husband, Thomas, and I were married for over 40 years. We built our life slowly, brick by brick, day by day. We were not rich, but our home was warm. Our meals were simple, and our love was steady. Our son, Daniel, was our only child. I remember holding him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine. I promised him everything I had, even though I did not know what that meant yet. Thomas worked long hours. I stayed home when Daniel was small. Later, I worked part-time at the local library. Our life followed a quiet rhythm: school mornings, dinner at the same table every night, weekend walks, holiday photos. Daniel grew up kind. At least that is how I remember him. He was not perfect, but he was gentle. When he married Laura, I truly believed we were gaining a daughter. Laura was polite, well-spoken, organized. She kept her home spotless. Her smile always arrived on time. At first, everything felt fine. They invited us for dinner. They asked our advice. They called often. Then small things changed. Phone calls became shorter. Invitations became rare. Advice was no longer welcome. I told myself this was normal. Young couples need space. Thomas noticed it too, but he said nothing. He never liked to disturb calm waters. When Daniel asked us to move in with them, I was surprised. "It will only be temporary," Daniel said, "just until you decide what you want to do next." Our old house had become hard to manage. The stairs were steep. The roof needed repairs. I agreed because I trusted my son. We packed our memories into boxes. We said goodbye to the home where we had lived most of our lives. I did not know I was also packing my dignity. The first week in their home felt like walking on glass. Laura showed us the guest room. She explained the rules gently but clearly. No shoes inside. Dinner is at 6. Please keep things tidy. I nodded. I thanked her. I told myself to be helpful. I washed dishes quietly. I folded laundry when no one asked me to. I stayed out of the way. Thomas spent most of his time reading or fixing small things around the house. Daniel was busy, always tired, always rushing. Little moments began to hurt. Laura rearranged the kitchen after I cooked. She corrected how I spoke to the grandchildren. She sighed when Thomas watched television too loudly. Once I heard her whisper to Daniel in the hallway, "They don't understand how things work now." I pretended not to hear. I had learned long ago that pretending can protect you. The basement came up slowly. "It would give everyone more space," Laura said one evening. "It's already finished." Daniel looked at us, waiting. I smiled before Thomas could speak. "Of course," I said, "that sounds perfect." The basement was colder, darker, but I told myself it was temporary. The day we moved our things downstairs, Laura closed the door behind us. That was the day my husband whispered the truth. But before that whisper, there were signs. Thomas grew quieter. He slept less. He watched Daniel with sad eyes. One night, as rain tapped against the basement window, I asked him softly, "Are you all right?" He did not answer right away. He just held my hand tighter. It was not strong, just old, like air that had been waiting too long to be breathed. There was one small window near the ceiling. It let in a thin line of daylight, but only in the afternoon. In the mornings, the room felt like night. I arranged our things carefully. I wanted the space to feel like a room, not a storage place. I placed our wedding photo on the small table. I folded our clothes neatly. I made the bed with care, smoothing every wrinkle. Thomas watched quietly. He did not complain. He never did. The first night in the basement, I could not sleep. I listened to the sounds above us. Footsteps, laughter, plates clinking. Life continued upstairs. Downstairs, we whispered. I worried that our voices might be too loud, even though no one had told us that. In the morning, I went upstairs early to help with breakfast. Laura was already there. She smiled, but her eyes stayed on the counter. "You don't need to come up so early," she said. "You should rest." Her words were kind. Her tone was final. I went back downstairs. Days passed. We were included less and less. Meals were sometimes finished before we came up. Conversations stopped when we entered the room. Daniel still greeted us, but his hugs felt rushed. Once I asked him, "Is everything all right?" He looked surprised. "Of course, Mom. Why wouldn't it be?" I did not know how to explain the feeling in my chest. It was like standing outside your own home, holding a key that no longer worked. Thomas began taking longer walks. He said the fresh air helped his legs. I knew it helped his heart. One afternoon, I found him sitting on the basement steps, staring at the door. He did not hear me at first. When he turned, his eyes looked tired. "Do you regret coming here?" I asked gently. He hesitated. "No," he said slowly. "I regret believing silence would protect us." That sentence stayed with me. Small hurts that add up. Laura never raised her voice. That made everything harder. If she had shouted, I might have understood. Anger can be explained. But her calm distance felt colder. She labeled shelves. She locked cabinets. She moved our things without asking. Once, she took our photo frame and placed it in a box. "It doesn't match the room," she said. I nodded and thanked her. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow. Thomas held me. "I should have spoken up sooner," he whispered. "You did nothing wrong," I said. But his body felt tense, like a man holding back a storm. The day of the door. The day the basement door became more than just a door, it was raining. Rain always makes memories heavier. Laura came downstairs with Daniel. She stood near the steps, careful not to step fully into the basement. "We've been talking," she said. Daniel avoided our eyes. "It might be better if you stayed mostly downstairs. The kids need structure." I understood what she meant. We were becoming an inconvenience. "I understand," I said, softly. Daniel nodded, relieved. As they went back up, Laura closed the door. The click echoed. I stood still. That was when Thomas leaned close and whispered, "Mary, I need to tell you something." My heart stopped. For years. I turned to face him. His eyes were wet. "Before Daniel was born, I almost left." The room felt smaller. "I was scared," he said. "Scared of responsibility. Scared I wasn't good enough." I had never heard this. "I stayed," he said. "Not because I was brave, but because I was afraid to lose you." Tears ran down his face. "I taught you that if I stay quiet, if I work hard, if I give you peace, it would be enough." I held his face in my hands. "You stayed," I said. "That matters." "But I taught our son the same thing," he whispered, "that silence is love." And suddenly everything made sense. Daniel's avoidance, his quiet agreement, his inability to stand between us and his wife. He was doing what he had learned, staying silent. A mother's realization. That night I did not sleep. I replayed my life in my mind. Every moment I swallowed my words, every time I chose peace over truth. I thought I was being kind, but maybe I was teaching others how to ignore me. In the morning, I looked at Thomas differently, not with anger, with understanding. We were both victims of our own silence. Tension above and below. Days became heavier. Laura avoided us more. The kids were told to play upstairs only. We became shadows in the home we helped build. One evening, I heard Daniel arguing softly with Laura. "She's my mother, and this is my house." Laura replied. Silence followed, the worst kind. Another quiet conversation. That night, Thomas said, "I don't want to die in a basement." His words were calm, but they broke something inside me. "We deserve light," I said. For the first time in years, I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger, strength. A small act of courage. The next day, I went upstairs during dinner. Laura looked surprised. "I made soup. Would you like some?" She hesitated. Daniel looked hopeful. We sat at the table together for the first time in weeks. It was quiet, but it was something. That evening at the dinner table stayed with me longer than I expected. We did not talk much, but silence can speak in many ways. Daniel kept looking at his plate, and Laura watched him instead of us. Thomas sat straight, his hands folded, like a man trying to take up as little space as possible. I realized then how carefully we had all learned to exist without touching the truth. After dinner, Laura cleared the table quickly. She did not ask for help. I stood up anyway, holding my bowl, and followed her into the kitchen. My heart beat loudly in my ears, and I felt foolish for being nervous in a home that belonged to my son. I placed the bowl in the sink and said thank you for the meal, even though I had made the soup myself. She nodded, her back to me. There was a pause, thick and uncomfortable. I almost walked away, but something inside me refused to move. I had spent a lifetime leaving rooms quietly. That night, my feet stayed planted. "Laura," I said softly, "have we done something wrong?" She froze for a moment, then turned slowly. Her face was calm, but her eyes were tired. "No," she said, "you haven't done anything wrong." She paused. "This situation is just difficult." I waited. Waiting had always been my skill, but this time I waited with my eyes open and my heart ready. "This is our home," she continued. "We need space. The children need routine. I don't want tension." Her words were careful, chosen to sound reasonable.
I understood her logic, but my chest hurt all the same. "We don't want tension either," I said. "We only want to feel like family." She looked away again. "Family changes," she said. "People grow." That sentence landed quietly but deeply. I nodded and left the kitchen, carrying more weight than I brought in. Downstairs, Thomas was sitting on the bed. He looked up when I entered, reading my face like he always had. I sat beside him and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his eyes closing at times, as if each word pressed against an old bruise. "They don't hate us," he said finally. "They just don't know how to hold us." I leaned my head against his shoulder. "We taught him this," I whispered. "We taught him to stay quiet." Thomas did not deny it. He only sighed, a long sound full of years. "Then maybe it's time we teach him something else." The next few days felt like standing at the edge of something I could not name. We were still polite, still careful, but something had shifted inside me. I no longer rushed back downstairs when voices stopped. I no longer apologized for existing. These were small changes, almost invisible, but they felt heavy with meaning. One afternoon, I found Daniel alone in the living room. The children were at school, and Laura was out. Sunlight filled the space, warm and forgiving. Daniel looked older to me then, his shoulders bent in a way I did not remember from his youth. "Sit with me," I said. He hesitated, then nodded. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, leaving a space like a question neither of us knew how to answer. "I didn't raise you to be afraid of conversations," I said gently. He swallowed. "I'm not afraid." I turned toward him. "Then why do you disappear when things get uncomfortable?" His eyes filled with something that looked like shame. He rubbed his hands together, a habit he had as a boy when he was nervous. "I don't want to hurt anyone." "Sometimes," I replied, "not speaking hurts more." He did not answer right away. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, marking time we had already lost. "Laura feels overwhelmed," he said finally. "She didn't plan for this." "I didn't plan to grow old either," I said softly, "but here we are." He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his face cracked. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "You don't have to fix it," I told him. "You just have to stand in it." That night, Daniel spoke to Laura. I knew because I heard their voices, low but intense, drifting down the stairs. I did not listen closely. I did not want to steal words that were not meant for me, but I felt the weight of them settle into the house. Later, Laura came downstairs alone. She stood near the bottom step, her hand resting on the railing. "Can we talk?" she asked. Thomas and I looked at each other, then nodded. We sat at the small table, the same one that held our wedding photo, still wrapped in a cloth. Laura remained standing, like she might leave at any moment. "I didn't mean to make you feel unwelcome," she began, "but I feel like I'm losing control of my own life." Her honesty surprised me. It was not kind, but it was real. "Control is a heavy thing to carry alone," I said. She sighed. "I didn't grow up with grandparents around all the time. This is new for me." "So is being pushed aside," I replied, my voice calm but steady. "We are all learning." Thomas cleared his throat. "We don't need much," he said. "Just respect and light." Laura looked at him, really looked, perhaps for the first time. His hair was thinner than it used to be. His hands trembled slightly when he folded them. He was not a problem to manage. He was a man nearing the end of his strength. "I didn't realize," she said quietly. That was not an apology, but it was a beginning. The following week, things changed slowly. Not magically, not easily, but slowly. The basement door stayed open more often. Meals were shared twice a week. The children came downstairs again, bringing noise and warmth with them. One evening, Daniel asked us to sit with him after dinner. Laura joined us, her posture less guarded than before. "We need to talk about the future," he said. My heart tightened, but I nodded. "We agree. We can't keep living like this, all of us pretending." Thomas reached for my hand. "We don't want to be a burden," he said. "You're not," Daniel said quickly. Then he paused. "But we also need boundaries." I respected that word. Boundaries are not walls, they are lines drawn with care. We understand. Laura spoke then, her voice softer than I had ever heard her. I want my children to know you, she said. I just need to feel like I'm not losing myself. I nodded. I spent years losing myself quietly. I don't want that for you. The room felt lighter after that, not happy, but honest, and honesty has its own kind of peace. Later that night, as Thomas and I lay in bed, he turned to me. I'm proud of you, he said. For what? I asked. For staying, he replied, and for speaking. I smiled into the darkness. I learned from you, I said. He shook his head gently. No, he said. You taught me. Weeks passed, then months. We began looking for a small place of our own, not because we were pushed out, but because we wanted to stand on our own again. Daniel helped us search. Laura asked our opinion on things, sometimes sincerely, sometimes awkwardly, but she asked. The day we found a small apartment with a sunny kitchen, I cried, not because it was perfect, but because it was ours. Thomas held my hand and smiled, his eyes bright with relief. On our last night in the basement, I stood by the door and listened to the house breathe. It no longer felt like a cage, it felt like a chapter closing. Daniel hugged us both before we left. He held on longer than usual. I'm sorry, he whispered. I kissed his cheek. I'm sorry too, I said, but we're still here. As we carried our boxes out, Laura stood by the door. She hesitated, then hugged me. It was brief and awkward, but it was real. Thank you for your patience, she said. Thank you for learning, I replied. When we drove away, Thomas reached over and squeezed my hand. That door didn't end us, he said. It opened something. I looked back at the house, then forward at the road ahead. For the first time in a long while, I felt light.
Moving into our own place felt strange at first. The apartment was small and the walls were thin, but sunlight poured through the kitchen window every morning like a quiet blessing. I found myself standing there often, holding a cup of tea, just watching the light move across the floor. It reminded me that life continues, even after deep hurt. Thomas noticed it too. He said the light made his chest feel lighter, as if something tight inside him had finally loosened. The first few nights were quiet in a way I had almost forgotten. No footsteps above us, no doors closing, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft sound of our breathing. I slept better than I had in months, not because everything was healed, but because I no longer felt like I was shrinking to fit someone else's space. That alone gave me peace. Thomas settled into a gentle routine. He took morning walks again, slower now, but steadier. He fixed small things around the apartment, even when they did not need fixing. I watched him regain pieces of himself that had gone silent in the basement. Sometimes he hummed while working, an old tune from years ago. That sound filled the rooms more than any furniture could. Daniel visited the first Sunday after we moved. He came alone. He looked around the apartment with careful eyes, as if measuring the weight of his choices. "It's nice," he said. "It feels warm." I smiled, knowing he was talking about more than the space. We sat together at the small table, and for the first time in a long while, conversation flowed without tension. He told us about work, about the children, about things that did not carry guilt or blame. "I've been thinking a lot," he said quietly, "about how I avoid hard moments." Thomas nodded, his face calm. "Avoiding doesn't make them disappear," he said. "It just moves them somewhere darker." Daniel looked down, absorbing the truth without defense. I felt proud of both of them in that moment. Growth does not come from anger. It comes from listening. Laura came later that month, bringing the children. The visit was careful but kind. She commented on the plants by the window and asked how we liked the neighborhood. These were small gestures, but they mattered. I noticed how she watched me with new eyes, not as a problem to manage, but as a person with her own history. When she thanked me for the tea, I believed her. Our relationship did not become perfect. There were still pauses in conversation, moments of uncertainty, but there was also respect. And respect, I learned, can heal places love alone cannot reach. One evening, Thomas and I sat together as the sun went down. The room glowed orange, then slowly faded into blue. He turned to me and said, "I wish I had been braver sooner." I took his hand and squeezed it gently. We were brave in the ways we knew how to be. Now we know better. I spent many nights thinking about silence. How often I had mistaken it for kindness. How often I had used it to protect others while hurting myself. I realized that silence can be peaceful, but it can also be permission for harm. Learning the difference took me a lifetime, but it was a lesson worth learning. The grandchildren began visiting more often. They laughed freely in our small living room, their voices filling every corner. I cooked meals without worrying if they were welcome. I told stories without fear of correction. In those moments, I felt whole again, not young, but whole. One afternoon, Daniel watched me with the children and said softly, "I didn't realize how much they needed this." I smiled. "Neither did I," I replied. Life reveals its needs slowly, often after we have already suffered from their absence. Laura joined us for dinner one evening and stayed after the children went to bed. She looked tired but open. I grew up believing control meant safety. Letting go feels scary. I understood her then, not as someone who hurt me, but as someone who was afraid. "Safety can come from trust, too," I said. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. That night, something fragile but real settled between us. Thomas's health had its quiet struggles, but his spirit felt stronger. He laughed more. He spoke more. He no longer apologized for taking up space. Watching him heal healed me too. Love, I learned, is not only about staying. Sometimes it is about standing. As months passed, the memory of the basement softened. It did not disappear, but it lost its sharp edges. It became a reminder rather than a wound, a reminder of what happens when people confuse endurance with love. One morning, Thomas whispered to me, "I'm glad you heard my truth that day." I knew what he meant. The whisper in the basement was painful, but it had also been freeing. Secrets weigh heavy, even when carried with good intentions. Releasing them is an act of love. I began writing letters to myself, something I had never done before. Small notes about what I deserved, about what I would no longer accept. These letters were not angry, they were gentle, like promises whispered in the dark. Daniel once asked me, "Do you forgive us?" I took my time answering. "I forgive, but I also remember." He nodded, understanding that forgiveness does not erase responsibility, it simply allows life to move forward. The door to the basement had closed, but another door had opened, a door toward honesty, toward balance, toward a love that does not require shrinking. As I sit now in my sunlit kitchen listening to the kettle boil, I feel something I did not expect: gratitude, not for the pain, but for the clarity it brought. Pain taught me where my boundaries should have been all along.
I am older now. I feel it in my knees when I stand too long, and in my hands when the weather changes. Age has slowed my body, but it has sharpened my understanding. I used to believe growing older meant becoming invisible, that the world slowly stopped listening to you, that you were meant to step aside quietly so others could move freely. I know now that this is not true. Growing older means you finally understand what matters enough to speak for. Some mornings I still wake up and think of the basement, not with pain, but with clarity. I remember the cold floor beneath my feet, the quiet click of the door closing, the way my heart sank without making a sound. That door taught me something no book ever could. It taught me that love without voice becomes weight. It taught me that patience without limits turns into erasure.
and it taught me that silence, when chosen too often, becomes a habit that teaches others how to treat you. Thomas sits beside me now as I write this in my heart. He reads the newspaper, glasses slipping down his nose, just like they always have. Sometimes he looks up at me for no reason at all. Those smiles feel earned. Our marriage did not break in that basement. It became honest. The truth he whispered that day did not weaken us. It freed us. We talk more now, about fears, about regrets, about the things we should have said years ago. There is no blame in those conversations, only understanding. We wasted too much time believing love meant endurance alone. Now we know it also means courage. Daniel visits often, sometimes with the children, sometimes alone. I see him trying, not perfectly, but sincerely. He stands up more now. He asks questions instead of avoiding them. He listens even when the answers make him uncomfortable. That is growth. Laura and I are not close in the way some mothers and daughters-in-law are, but we are respectful, and respect is a powerful form of peace. She has learned that control cannot replace connection. I have learned that kindness does not require self-erasure. We meet in the middle, carefully, like people crossing a bridge from opposite sides. The grandchildren do not know the full story. They do not need to. They only know that Grandma's house feels warm, that Grandpa tells gentle stories, that laughter is allowed to fill the room. That is enough. Sometimes, late at night, Thomas reaches for my hand and says, "I'm glad we didn't disappear." So am I. Because disappearing is easy. You just stop speaking. You stop asking. You stop expecting. But staying present takes strength. I want anyone listening to my story to understand this. You can be gentle without being small. You can be kind without being silent. You can love deeply and still protect your dignity. If you are living in someone else's basement, not just a room, but a place where your voice feels hidden, please hear me. You deserve light. Not someday, not when it is convenient for others, now. If you are a parent, remember this. Your children learn how to treat you by watching how you treat yourself. If you are a partner, remember this. Peace should never cost you your truth. And if you are aging, please know this. Your worth does not decrease as your body slows. Your wisdom increases. The basement door closed behind us that day, but it did not end our story. It began a new chapter, one written with honesty instead of fear. I no longer confuse silence with love. I no longer apologize for taking up space, and I no longer wait for permission to be seen. Life did not give me loud victories. It gave me quiet strength, and that has been enough. If you are listening to this and holding back your voice, I hope my story sits with you gently, like a hand on your shoulder, like someone saying, "You are not wrong for wanting more." Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak softly and still speak. And sometimes the truth whispered in the dark is the very thing that brings you back into the light.